hello, and welcome back to the Can You Dig It podcast, where we dig down, dig deep, and dig into the process of self-discovery and personal growth. I'm here with Jessica Rebello from Unleash Potential Life Coaching, as usual. I'm Jordan Knox, coming at you from the Center for Alignment. We're bringing you 2+ decades of combined counseling and coaching experience to explore the theory and, more importantly, the application of subjects in mental health, emotional awareness, and we always mention it twice, personal growth. Today's episode is the final in our anxiety-focused series, our anxiety series. We hope you've gotten a lot out of the other ones. It's possible you're only listening to this one and didn't hear the other ones. So that doesn't apply to you. But we hope if you listen to them, you got a lot out of them. It's just like, as I said it out loud, it was just like, and I'm an idiot. One of those moments, you know.
It happens.
Going into the Q&A, right? So we reached out to, a lot of people we know, some of our listeners, people in the groups we run, and we got a lot of questions. And we took time sifting through them to pick out the best ones that would apply to the most people. And if your questions didn't get picked, know that we do appreciate your input and putting your questions out there for us, for sure. So I want to get us rolling. Without further ado, the Q&A, the very, very applicable real life scenarios and questions that we're getting asked by the average person. Why don't you start us off, Jess, if you want to ask the first question, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So the first question from our listeners is, does cutting someone or something that was causing anxiety out of your life also remove the anxiety? Or is anxiety still present, just not brought out as frequently?
Does cutting someone or something that was causing anxiety out of your life also remove the anxiety? Or is anxiety still present, just not brought out as frequent? So it's a very good question, because what it speaks to is, right, like if I'm not getting triggered, does that mean I'm better? Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, right? Like if I kept getting anxious or insecure or really nervous and worked up over an ex-girlfriend, and now that we're not talking, I'm not feeling that anymore. Does that mean the anxiety is gone? My answer would be not necessarily. I'm sure there's instances where people have like cut people off and it just kind of worked and the anxiety kind of went away. Is it common? Probably not. I would venture to say the average scenario like this would be one where, yes, you're cutting off or setting more firm boundaries with whatever's triggering your anxiety, for sure. But just because you've cut that off, right, is the work that you need to do in you done? No, that work is not done. Is the insecurity that's causing the anxiety, the lack of safety inside myself, if that is not worked on and truly grasped and owned and cultivated, then no, it's very, very, very unlikely that just cutting off that trigger or the thing that external thing that is triggering you is removing your anxiety. So it's a very good question. And to simplify, I would say the anxiety is still there, but you are tiptoeing around life better and setting better boundaries so that it's not elicited. Now, to me, that sounds like coping, right? How am I coping with my anxiety? Well, I'm avoiding a lot of my triggers. Okay, that's one way to cope. There's a very big difference between coping and transcending. And the question here is, does that get rid of my anxiety completely? Does that mean my anxiety is gone? That's when I would say, like, you've transcended your anxiety, right? That means whether the girlfriend's back or not, you're at peace. Mm-hmm. Something along those lines. So go ahead.
Something I want to add to that too. I think when we initially cut someone out, and especially if we're thinking of it like, oh, well, my anxiety dissipate if I cut this person out of my life. Sometimes your anxiety actually might increase when you cut this person out, because it's really like the insecurities will flare, being unsure, should I have cut them out? Should I have not cut them out? Right. The self-doubt starts to come in. So a lot of times, like, the anxiety will increase for a period of time, but hopefully if we're coping through it and eventually getting to somewhere, a place of transcending, the anxiety will decrease or it will eventually go away, but there has to be a lot of coping with it. But I just want people to be okay with some increase of the anxiety, because it is also like removing something that maybe once was safe to us or once was secure to us. And then we take it out and it's like, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's a different feeling then.
Interesting. Right. So like, even though that person was causing anxiety, it's very possible there was this comfortably anxious relationship that you had that when you
Absolutely.
remove it, all of a sudden, well, now you're like, yes, the anxiety's gone kind of, but now I'm uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden the anxiety comes back because I'm
Mhm.
more uncomfortable than I
Mhm.
was. So, right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Like the pain of the change kind of
Exactly.
exacerbating what we're used to our anxiety being. So yeah, that's possible too, for sure. For sure. And the last thing I'll say in this instance is, and this is, I'm always doing what I can to empower everyone I talk to. Obviously, especially clients or listeners here, but when from a place of empowerment, we're always looking at ourselves. We're looking at what we can own, what we can change, what we can do, right? What control, what action, what can I do? What control do I have in this? What power do I have in this experience? So going off of that, I would say just, the question says, does removing this person remove the anxiety? No, because it's your anxiety, not theirs. They may be triggering it. They may be triggering you to be anxious or to get nervous or to start ruminating or bring up those insecure feelings, but they're just triggering that. All that stuff exists in you, whether that person is triggering it or not. And that's something ideally that you'll look at. And there are ways, like when I'm working with someone, we face that stuff. We don't necessarily avoid the girlfriend that caused the anxiety. We set a boundary with it, and then we work on appropriate responses and things I can do to empower myself on the times where I consciously choose to engage her, knowing my anxiety is going to be elicited, because that's like, I have to face the fear if I ever want the fear to go away.
Mhm.
So it's time to face her. Let me face this. Again, we don't do that right away. We talk a lot about it. We explore ways to do that in a healthy, effective way. That's going to rewire and recondition this insecure foundation inside of you amidst that interaction. Did that all make sense?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Cool. All
Totally
right.
agree.
So we're going to move on to question 2. This is a good one and speaks a little bit to what we just talked about as well. Question number 2. Is my lack of boundaries the reason my anxiety is so bad?
I believe that boundaries equal security within ourselves, right? And if we're not having any boundaries or not having firm boundaries or boundaries that we're even implementing, then like there are some insecurity flare ups that we might feel. What I mean by this, sometimes people who don't necessarily have boundaries or they don't have strong boundaries, they end up either being like a yes man, that they just say yes to doing everything, or they end up being a people pleaser, that they'll just do something to make the other person feel really good or feel they want to look good in the other person's eyes. But when we're not setting a boundary, and then when we start to do things that maybe we don't want to do or we don't feel 100% comfortable doing or certain doing, anxiety comes because it's like, well, I don't really want to be doing this, but I'm doing this anyway. And I don't know how to get out of it, right? Like the power of no. A lot of people have a really hard time saying no to things just because another person is asking them. So, is your lack of boundaries the reason why your anxiety is so bad? It's not the only reason why your anxiety is so bad. It's could definitely be a component of it, depending on what the anxiety is related to, right? Like what are the thoughts that are happening in your head when you're not setting a boundary, or when you wish you could be setting a boundary, but you don't feel quite comfortable or quite confident setting it yet. So it's like one hand kind of goes with the other on that. But at the same time, it's like when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to anxiety, like boundaries is your security. Like a boundary is almost like you're like the security blanket of a child, right? Like they carry that around with them everywhere. Like we all need to have boundaries because it makes us, not makes us, it allows us to know that we're doing exactly what we want to do for the intention of us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, when I picture boundaries, when somebody brings up boundaries, I picture it very literally. Like when we talk about the body and I'm all like metaphorical and figurative and you're literal, this is where I go literal. And I picture like either like a hedge or a fence around a house, right? Like this metaphorical house that represents me, my life, my identity. And there's either like a wide open gate where there's either no boundary, right? There are people that have zero hedges, zero fences, no boundaries on their property. There are people that have a guard gate, that you have to dial to get in. There are people that have a swinging fence that if you got out of your car, you could open it. There are people that, you know what I mean? Like there's a guest list, there's a et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So rolling with that, that like literal translation of the word boundaries, we need to be firm with what and who we let in and why we're letting it in, and then how do we work on that? How do we not do that? How do we keep the gate closed at times, et cetera? But like you said, it's the power of no. You're going to have to say no to some people who want to get into your property. And it's not just people, it's internal as well. We have to set boundaries within ourselves mentally too. We got to set boundaries emotionally. Like I this is not the space for me to feel this pain right now. I can't. Well, I'm gonna do that later. Okay, I can't let you in right now, pain or grief. But we will spend time together later on the couch, or a thought, a ruminating thought, or belief, or worry that like yes, this is very real. It's a rational worry, but right now I can't let you in. I need to be present right now. I need to be where I'm at. I need to be with my clients. I need to run this group. I need to do this podcast. There's a time and place to let you in and spend time with you sitting on my porch, having a conversation like friends. So whether it's a thought or an emotion, there is this internal sense of boundaries that is important for people to, I think, just be aware of, I guess, for the purposes of this conversation and that question. I apologize if I went on too much of a tangent there, but I think it was important. Okay, so moving on to question number 3.
Okay. When we finally commit to facing anxiety, how do we know whether to focus on coping mechanisms or focus on root causes?
Another good question. And definitely one that comes up a lot with the like average client who comes in with symptoms of anxiety, that's for sure. Because, I would say the quick answer is it depends on the severity or the intensity of the anxiety. It depends on the amount of dysfunction it's causing you at present. There are people where it's so severe that my first recommendation is going to be like, look, it sounds like you're unable to even function or get to my office. So you might need to it might be smart to go to a psychiatrist, to get on some light medication so we can start looking at this in a safer way and understanding it differently. But the anxiety itself, it's preventing you from doing so many things. We don't have a choice. We need to lean on some of the, for lack of a better word, coping mechanisms we have. And I see medication as a coping mechanism. It's not you're not going to the root cause. You're not transcending anything. You're learning to cope with, right? By not feeling it so intensely or something along those lines. So I would say it depends on the severity of the anxiety. Once you've committed to looking at it, exploring it, understanding it, changing it, transcending it, etc., making sure that you're living a healthy day-to-day life is number one. Can you commit to the new habits? Can you, yes, going to the root in session with me is one thing. It's another thing to take yourself there at least a few other days a week and make a habit of this, if not every day. Really going to that root so you understand what this really is, where it comes from, and it clearly and simply. Exactly what all the variables are, what the working components are, where the conditioning took place, where the triggers take place, what happened as an adult that triggered all the old conditioning that you never had to deal with before, that really brought it out and exacerbated the symptoms. So I think it's very rare that we immediately start with, all right, it's time to transcend it. Let's do it. Let's get to the root. No. The first thing that I do with everybody is, how are you navigating day to day? Let's look at that first. Let's make sure survival's taken care of. And then we can work on, ripping up the roots, planting new seeds, and thriving with these new planted seeds that grow into these beautiful trees, But it's very rarely the first place I go. So anything to add?
I agree with that. I also think there's a level of emotion regulation that we need in order to transcend to the root cause. Because a lot of times the root cause is also going to bring up its own handset of emotions and its own feelings and triggers, and you know what I mean? That it's like it's not necessarily present right now, but when we get to that point, it might get a little worse. We want to make sure that we take care of ourselves in case it does get to that point.
Right. Absolutely. Well said. Because to get to those roots, right, you're going back to pain that you probably haven't looked at in a very long time. Things that you haven't looked at. Maybe it's not even conscious pain. Like you're going back and you're thinking like, oh, this will be interesting to see where this comes from. And then you don't even realize, like in session, it's just very objective because it's such a safe space and you trust your therapist or coach so much and all that. But then you get home and all of a sudden, like your mom calls and you're snappy and rude to her on the phone. I've seen stuff like that where I'm snapping at one of my parents or my siblings. And afterwards, I'm like so apologetic because I'm like, I'm sorry. Like this morning in meditation, all I was looking at was, where my insecure attachment stuff came from. and I mean, that's a true story for me. Like I have had to own my stuff like that. Like right now, I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing 7-year-old you that bullied me. Like something like that. So it may happen. It may happen for sure. Okay, we're doing good. Moving on. Question number 4. Number four. I don't know why I said that so weird. Question number 4. We're having fun with this. We're making light of anxiety.
Not a bad thing.
Bring some levity to your anxiety. How come I feel anxious when I'm in a good mood and not worried about anything?
Aha. I love this question. And I'm so happy somebody asked this question.
Too, isn't it? Yeah.
I think there is a common thought that when we're feeling anxious, that we're also thinking anxiously. That like our thoughts and our feelings are always so paired 100% of the time, and that's just not actual. We could be in a great mood and we could have a fantastic day at work and we get home and we make dinner and we're still in a really great mood, but our body is literally like eating itself because we're so deathly anxious and we're not sure why. Anxiety doesn't always come with conscious thoughts. There's a lot of unconscious that comes with our anxiety. And just because we're not thinking about it on the forefront doesn't mean that it's not going to be there, that we're feeling it also. When we're in a good mood and we still get anxious, I tell people like that's when your coping skills come in. Because since it's not at the forefront, it's probably a little bit easier to tap into it to kind of get the anxiety to decrease a little bit because it's not consumed our brains already.
Interesting. Yeah.
That, you know what I mean? The coping is a little bit easier to be like, all right, let me just dance for 5 minutes just to get this release out of my body, just to get the uncertainty out of my body and continue with my good day. And your body probably will calm down a little bit or whatever the coping is for that person. Right? I just thought of dancing or listening to a song or something, you know what I mean? Let me go on a walk. Let me just pause. Let me go on a 10-minute walk, listen to my meditation. Like, all right, I feel a little bit more centered. It's easier to do that when our thoughts are not also paired with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, that question makes it so, again, how come I feel anxious when I'm in a good mood and not worried about anything? And that, you spoke to this a bit. There's this level of unconscious, or even like unconscious is like I'm not aware of it, and subconscious is it's there. And again, like I'm not necessarily aware of it, but it exists beneath the tip of the iceberg. Right? It's like right there beneath the surface. If I choose to dig, I can see it, right? So there's this unconscious or subconscious anxious energy that is just pervasive or persistently presenting inside you and in your body. For whatever reason that you're right. We talked about this in the first few episodes that Like I define anxiety as our body's response to an overestimated threat.
Mhm.
So it's very possible there's just this constant pattern of avoidance that you're telling your brain that we're afraid of everything. So it doesn't
Mhm.
matter where you are, what you're doing, you're in fear. You're in fear. And it's not acute to the extent that like I'm having an anxiety attack, but I am feeling like my heart's pounding a little bit. I'm definitely a little more like aware and edgy than I'm used to being, right? You feel that anxiousness right as opposed to anxiety in those moments. Yeah, I mean it's going to be really hard to just get rid of that if your body's used to being in that state.
Mhm.
A lot of us don't even realize that, like how, like when the first thing any therapist would say, or the first thing you would imagine any therapist would say when you talk about coping with anxiety, what are they going to do? They're going to say, breathe, take some
Mhm.
deep breaths, slow yourself down. That's the cliche go to,
Mhm.
right? I try not to go there unless people tell me that's where they want to go, because it's not working for modern people so much.
No.
We're just
No.
way too distracted all the
Yeah.
time.
No.
We have to be a little more realistic with the people we're talking to. But we don't realize how associated anxiety is with breathing, too. We're taking these short, quick breaths all day long, right? That almost seem like, I mean, if I do that long enough, my body and my brain are going to start acting accordingly. My heart's going to
Mhm.
start pumping more blood faster, right? Because there's less oxygen coming into my system. My brain is going to function differently with less oxygen in my system. My brain is going to think it's being threatened because there's less oxygen in my system. So these short, quick breaths are doing more than we realize. And we've been taking these short, quick breaths our whole life because we were never taught either how to properly breathe, or we were raised in an insecure environment or anxious environment where we were just taught that this is normal and this is how
Mhm.
I should breathe. So there's a low level of anxiety just with the type of breathing I have. So just practicing slowing down, practicing breathing more deeply, living life in a more just slower, like a much slower pace in terms of awareness and action, and everything will still get done. It will, I promise. You'll still get everything done, but you will be so different while achieving it. And the anxiety probably won't be there. It probably won't if you're consciously slowing down, especially with your breath, you deepening and slowing that breath. So I would say that.
Mhm.
Um, is there anywhere else you would want to go with this?
I would just say it's, just more about like just commenting off you were saying. It's like being in the moment, right? Like we have to be in the moment and just be like, all right, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
And like ask yourself that, have that dialogue with yourself, but like also listen to your needs and respond to your needs, because like just how your anxiety, what you need for your anxiety is going to be different what I need for my anxiety. Sometimes it might be the same or similar, but for the most part, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Same themes, right? Like maybe I really need a breathing exercise before and after work because that's really what kind of centers me for my day and at the end of my day. Maybe you need it right when you wake up in the morning and again at lunch, whatever it is, right? I think it's
Right.
just like we have to be intentional with responding to our own needs and figuring it out, like what exactly works for us and what works for our anxiety. So then it's like, okay, I just need to put this into practice more.
Yeah.
All right, onward.
Onward.
Ready?
Number 5. Go for it.
Number 5, what kind of methods do you have to deal with sudden onset of anxiety attacks?
What kind of methods do we have to deal with the sudden onset of an anxiety attack? So at this point, the question is, I'm already in panic mode. I'm
Mhm.
already in fight or flight mode. Heart is pounding. I'm legitimately like, if you're listening and you've never had one, it's hard to relate. But if you've had a panic attack, you know that when you're having a panic attack, the only thing going through your head is, I'm gonna die.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna make it through this. I can't breathe. My heart is pounding so fast it's gonna explode, or I'm gonna have a heart attack. And I don't care what you tell me, I'm not gonna make it through this. I'm not gonna make it through this. I'm not okay. I'm gonna die. I'm not okay. I mean, that's what it feels like to be in a panic attack. It does. And I hope I didn't just make anybody anxious with going there, but I've had them in my life, and they are the least fun thing you could ever go through. So what methods do we have when you're already in that state? I'm going to be honest with you. If you're not consciously and consistently cultivating a practice of coping, of some kind of coping mechanism, you're not going to go there in that state. You're just going to have to get through it as best you can and try and remind yourself that you'll be okay. I'm being very real here. Like, you're like, just because I'm telling you a coping mechanism you can use right now, I would bet my life on it that you're not able to actually apply it when the time came. I really would. And I don't like saying that, but I'm saying it because I want to emphasize the importance of a consistent practice. When you want to rewire something, or you want to remember to go to something, or when your body's in fight or flight mode and you've got to lift the heavy weight of the emotional reality of a panic attack, that's such a heavy weight. I mean, if we're likening it to the gym, like, it's time for you to max out. How much can you bench? Because it's time to get that much off your chest. You're not going to be able to max out at that level of weight if you're not consistently working out at least a little bit. So I would say, number one method, slow down and focus on the breath. Yes, it's that simple. Yes, it's that ridiculous, but it's just deep breath in, deep breath out, deep breath in. I mean, it is that simple, but the whole time your heart's going to be pounding and your mind is going to want to go every direction it possibly can to protect you because it thinks you're in danger. It thinks you're in danger so real that your body is legitimately reacting as if someone was holding a gun to your head or a saber-toothed tiger was cornering you in a cave. That's what's happening in your body. So, when you're in that place, it's slow yourself down mentally. Tell yourself you're safe. I'm okay. I'm safe. I got me. I'm okay. I'm safe. I got me. And slow down with the breaths. Slow down with the breaths. Another method for people, especially our culture, that's not great on being aware of internal stuff, go to the external. Ground yourself with your senses, right? And I know this is where my partner would have gone if I didn't say it, because this is like Jessica's go-to. And for what it's worth, it's become one of mine because of our conversation. So thank you. Now I sound even smarter than I already do. It's great. But still not humble. Still no humility. Yeah. But we're getting there.
Still there.
We're getting there. I know it. I believe I can. Go to your senses, right? Something along the lines of, what are 3 things I see, 3 things I hear, 3 things I feel? Go, quick. And those will ground you in a very just physical sense of reality. They'll take you away from the ruminating. They'll take you away from the fear-based thought process. They take you away from your heart pounding, so to speak. And kind of, it reminds you that you're safe. Like, okay, I see my counter, I see my cabinets, I see my fridge. I hear my AC. I hear them working outside. I hear the laundry going. Okay. I feel my butt in the seat. I feel my feet on the floor. And I feel my hand on the microphone. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, that's precisely what we're saying to do. And if it doesn't work the first time, do it again. Do it again. Be consistent and be firm with yourself.
And you're right about all of that. And I love that you're incorporating the senses and everything like that. But something I want to add for anyone who does struggle with this, it's like, you have to make sure that you're working on your coping skills and your grounding techniques before you get to the stage of a panic attack. Right? Like, we cannot, us as human beings cannot adapt to new information if we're not in the present moment, right? Like, if we're not in our window of tolerance. And I think we've spoken about this in other episodes. So it's like, you need to make sure that the moments that you're not feeling like you're in a panic attack, or you're not feeling like you're to that level or to that extreme, it's like, okay, still ground, still cope, still practice some of these techniques. So it's when you do get to that point, then you're like, all right, I already know how to do this. This is not so unknown to me, or it's not so scary to me. I just need to tap in and try it. And then it becomes more adaptable and more adaptable and more adaptable. And then you have some say when you are full blown panicking that it's like, I could breathe and then I could do this. And a lot of times I'll make a plan with people. It's like, first, I want you to try breathing. When you're done breathing, I want you to take 4 sips of water. And when you're done with that, I want you to try to do this. Do you know what I mean? Like I will totally make a plan with them. So when it comes time, they're actually doing something.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, and it's very important to, I guess, if you make that plan and you have a go-to when the time comes, ideally you'll remember to utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you, and this is something that one of our former supervisors, Ken, used to say a lot. He used to say, but how do you remember to remember? And it's a great question. And the answer to that, which is what you touched upon and what I touched upon, is practice. That's the best way to prime your mind to go to this place, to give yourself a fighting chance to choose your reality, to choose your thoughts, to choose your actions when you start to feel the attack coming. That's the only way you're going to have a fighting chance, is if you're practicing. You
Absolutely.
know, panic attacks
Absolutely.
are so overwhelmingly difficult. You know, it's as if, again, like, I love my metaphors, like you're stepping in the ring with Mike Tyson. You know, like, there's no winning this. I'm just gonna have to ride this out. I'm gonna die. I just got to make it through this. Oh my god. Like, that's what it's like for most people. It's just pain. Oh, thank God it's slowing down. Oh my god. And we're just victims. We're at the mercy of the panic attack. If you want to have a fighting chance to hold your own, you're going to have to practice. You're going to have to spar. You're going to have a game plan, and you're probably going to need a coach. If you're at the point where you're having anxiety attacks, you're going to need someone in your corner guiding you and helping you, because you've gotten yourself this far. You probably need some other perspective to go further than that, you know? So anyway, this will probably be the last one. We're at about the 35 minute mark already. I know these things fly by, right?
I know.
This will probably be the last one, but it's also a good one. Who's asking the question? Is it my turn or yours? I think it's my turn to ask.
I think it's your turn.
How do you find your triggers when there seemingly are none, or when it seems like everything is a trigger? Another very real, very good question.
Yep. So my first reaction to this is like, knowledge is power. We need to know about things that are triggers, and we need to know about things that are not triggers before we could say, like, how do we know which is which? What I mean by that. Remember, I think it was on episode 2 or 3 of the anxiety series. I spoke something about we need to create like a thought record, like a thought log that kind of says, you know, exactly where our thoughts are. Are they anxious? Are they insecure? It's the same exact practice when it comes to our triggers. If something is making you feel X, you need to write that down. When I went to the bakery, I felt really anxious. Does that mean the bakery is my trigger? We don't know yet. We're not there yet. But I also realized that every time I went to the bank, I felt X. And then every time I went to Target and Walmart, I also felt the same way. But then you could look at that and analyze, right? Like, I think when we think about what is a trigger versus what is not a trigger, like, we need to analyze it and say, like, what is this situation bringing out of us that's making us question if it's a trigger or not? So that's when I go into, like, knowledge is power, because you really need to figure that out about yourselves. And I think a lot of times people, you know, clients will ask me, and I'm sure for you too, it's like, well, is this my trigger? Is that my trigger? You know, everyone wants to label it as a trigger because that label then makes them feel better. It's not up to us, though, to label that. It's up to them to label that. It's up to them to say, like, yes, this is a trigger for me, or no, it's not a trigger for me. And even if we are calling it a trigger or we're not, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, we still have to process it and deal with it the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a part of this that reminds me of the what question was it? Question 4 that we already went over, right? How come I feel anxious when I'm in a good mood? Uh, it does. It makes me think like consciously there's nothing bad going on. So why am I getting triggered? Why am I feeling anxious? And it's very possible that the only thing triggering you is just this habit of breathing you have, or this unkept or unacknowledged energy inside of you is coming to a head, and there's nothing necessarily going on outside of you that's a specific trigger for it. But in the same respect, it's like everything is a trigger outside of you simply because of the internal state you're already in. Any kind of noise is going to make you jumpy or a little more edgy than usual. Any questioning of, any kind of question you get is going to be, threatening and something you have to defend, as opposed to something, you need to explore, or if you already have this energy simmering inside you, at least. So,
Yeah.
And to go back to the previous answer as well, to the previous question, something I touched upon is, again, if you've made it this far and you can't figure it out, therapists or coach, that's their job. It's their job. And if you go in with that very specific question, you're allowed to ask that very specific question and only have like a few sessions exploring it. Ask them for ways you can look at it. Ask them what you should do. Can we be creative? This and that. Don't let them put their agenda on you. Come in with what you want. Be clear. I just want to look at ... I don't have $8,000 to spend on a year's worth of sessions, but I'm definitely willing to put a few $100s towards figuring out what these triggers are and maybe talking about some different techniques I can use with you. Go for it. Be honest. Be assertive. Take charge of your path, your treatment, your, growth, so to speak.
There's also so many anxiety workbooks that you could find on Amazon, or you could probably even Google them. Like Therapist Aid. It's a website that I usually go for free worksheets. There's so many worksheets out there that are made for anxiety and made for figuring out like the common themes of it and triggers of it and coping, that like even if somebody doesn't feel comfortable going to meet with a coach or a therapist, or finances, it's just not an option. Like there's so many free resources online that you could access and you could do that will give you so much more information that you had if you hadn't tried it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Use your free sources. Use your free resources. I made that word up. Free sources.
That was good.
It is as simple as, going on to literally Googling the words, worksheets for identifying anxiety triggers. I promise you, hundreds will come up. You will have so many options. So it's, and Therapist Aid for sure. I've used that as well. There are a lot of different places you can go. That information is pretty available to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, going along the lines of empower yourself, take charge, take some action. A lot of times it's overwhelming or scary to do it. So ask a friend, set aside some time, and let's meet at Starbucks. We usually just shoot the shit and I complain about my anxiety, but this time, can we actually look some stuff up together? Can you like hold me accountable to making sure we come away with like 2 worksheets for me? Something like that. You don't need a coach for that. You just need a friend.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Well said. We got to start slowing down. We're almost at right about the 40-minute mark here. So we are going to slow down for today. I hope everybody got a lot out of this. I certainly got a lot out of this. I love these Q&As. They're very, very real. And they help us kind of tie together, everything we've already explored in the first part of the series, so to speak. We had another Q&A prior to this, but they seem to be very effective. Any final thoughts, comments, anything to say or close with?
The only thing I would urge our listeners to do is just find out more information about your anxiety. If you are someone who is struggling with it, if you are someone who is battling with it on a day-to-day basis, like it does not need to be this way. There's so many things you could do to figure out more about it. And I just encourage everyone to do that, just because it can be such an easier life without battling this stuff.
Yeah. It is. And it's much easier to face the fear and feel more comfortable with it, even if it still is a part of your life, when it actually has like a face and a name, and like you can start really identifying it, looking at it, understanding it, externalizing it, talking to it, owning like, all right, I can have a relationship with this anxiety. I don't just have to avoid it completely. It's not a bully. It's not like, it's not something I need to stand up to and face, but it is something that makes me uncomfortable, that I should probably cultivate some kind of healthier relationship for sure. You're not at the mercy of it, or at least you don't have to be. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. We will check in with you next week. Everybody have a great one, and we'll take it from there.